Pet store creeper. I worked in a pet store in Wisconsin in 1998. I was 16 years old, as far as I can remember, saving up for a car and insurance. The boss assigned me to the fish section, and it would be down to me to clean the tanks and feed the fish and sell the fish to customers. One day an old man came in, and he really gave me the creeps. He had a glass eye and his skin looked all waxy. He asked me which fish I liked the most. I told him I like a particular goldfish. I left for a moment to speak to some other customers. They weren't buying any fish, just looking, but I wanted to get away from that weirdo. He smelled funny too, smelled like putrid meat. The woman I was talking to slapped her mouth and pointed behind me. I turned and saw the weird old man with the glass eye reaching into the tank, chasing the little goldfish. The one I said was my favorite. He caught one, not my favorite, by the tail, and brought it out and shoved it into his mouth. He chewed on it, and then slime dripped over his lips onto his chin. I was in complete shock. He was just staring at me while chewing. The manager and a man called Bill, who worked on the bird section, came running into the fish section. They chased the man out. I ran to the staff room and called the cops. The man was long gone. I know what you might be thinking. Well, it was only a fish, but if you were there, it would have shocked you too. Besides, it got worse. He was back again a few weeks later, despite being banned. He wasn't on my section. I heard the birds going crazy and found him in their cage, trying to grab them. I saw him grab a small green parrot and squeezing it. It died. Its head flopped down limp. The man with the glass eye shoved the parrot's head into his mouth and pulled it off. I saw the blood and I ran out the shop crying. I remember phoning in sick a lot during that period. I was so freaked out. Bill rang me one day and said that the man had been caught by the police and was cautioned to stay away from the store. I went back to work and everything went back to normal for a time. A few months later, the man with the glass eye was back. Only this time, he was over in the small mammal section. My work colleague and good friend Jess, we still talk on this regularly, started screaming, "Call the police! Call the police!" I ran over. The man was standing in the rabbit hutch and was tearing open a rabbit's throat with his bare teeth and hands. The rabbit was thrashing around in panic. There was blood all over the man's mouth. When he saw me, he pointed and screamed something in a weird language. It scared the hell out of me. He threw the rabbit at Jess and ran right at me. He was growling like a zombie. He had a look in his face like he wanted to bite into my throat. I ran behind Bill, and he thumped the old man when he grabbed my hair and pulled it. Bill and another man who had only come in to buy his dog some treats wrestled and pinned the old man down on the floor. The cops arrested him this time. I was naturally freaked out for months. Turns out, the man with the glass eye was sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and is still, to my knowledge, locked up there to this day, or maybe he's dead. That comforts me more, to be honest. I will never forget him pointing at me with those bloody fingers and teeth. So, creepy guy in the store, if you are still alive, let's never, ever meet again. Sharing on behalf of my mother, creepy pet store man. In 1989, my mother worked at a pet store. She was 25 years old, and I was only months old. While my parents worked, my grandparents watched me. But one day my mom was cleaning out cages when this middle-aged man walked over to her and asked how she was. The question started out general, but got more and more personal. Mom was busy but didn't want to be rude, so she just gave short and vague answers. Eventually, the man bent down and whispered to her, "You aren't being very friendly to your customers. I know you have a baby. Maybe if something happened to her, you wouldn't be so standoffish to your customers." With this, the man got up and left. The manager found my mother so shaken and upset that, after he learned what happened, he insisted on calling the police. Nothing ever came of it, and my mom couldn't recall having seen the man anywhere before. She never had me at the pet store at the time, so he couldn't have seen me there. He also knew I was a girl, so that's an extra bit of information he knew as well. Mom only worked at the store a few days after that. She quit and found another because she didn't feel safe with him knowing where she worked. Apparently, for quite a while after the incident, my grandpa kept his rifle within grabbing distance when babysitting. A mind like a Babylonian orgasm. This happened about a year ago. I worked at a pet store where we adopt our cats from local shelters. They aren't our cats. We are an intermediary to help them get seen and adopted. We follow the interview and application process set by the various shelters in order to determine whether or not to adopt to a person. The application process often includes contacting the landlord to ensure that it is fine that the person has cats on their property. One afternoon, a youngish man came into the store, maybe in his mid to late 20s, and walked back to our adoption center. He was thin, maybe a little dirty looking, but there was nothing too remarkable about his appearance. When he reached the cats, without even looking at them, he turned to my manager and said, "I'll take that one and that one." He points to Fluffers and Demo, a cat and a kitten, from 2 different shelters, located in 2 different cages. Fluffers clearly has a sign on her cage saying she was approved for adoption, so my manager said, well, Fluffers is spoken for, but we can have you visit Demo. She went into the little visitation room with the guy, and I walked away. Glad I dodged the bullet of helping out that particular guy. He just rubbed me the wrong way, I don't know why. A few minutes later, my manager came to get me. She asked me to go talk to the guy to see what I thought because, in her words, he seemed a little off. We take the responsibility of making sure our cats go to good homes very seriously, so I sighed and agreed. When I went into the little visitation room, the guy was sitting on the bench with Demo clutched in his arms, just staring at the wall. The kitten was squirming a lot. He seemed okay, but he really didn't seem to want to be held by the guy. I introduced myself and asked if he was interested in maybe adopting Demo. The guy said yes, he would take him. There is a 2-page application to fill out before you can be approved, and if you rent, we'll need your landlord's number so we can make sure it's okay you adopt a cat. He was quiet. Did you fill out the application? What application? He was still holding the kitten, who clearly wanted away from him, and he turned to look at me, and I saw his pupils were huge and black. His irises barely visible. I noticed that his leg was twitching, like he could barely sit still. I felt my palms get sweaty, and I explained the application process again, adding that it could take 24 to 72 hours to process everything. He focused on me and said, "I can't take him today?" "Well, let's get you to fill the app and we'll see what we can do." And then he starts shouting out of nowhere, "Jesus fucking Christ, okay, give me the goddamn paper!" I wordlessly hand him a clipboard with the application on it. He lets go of the kitten, who I immediately scooped up. I could feel the guy's heat on the kitten's fur, which severely disturbed me for some reason. I clutched the kitten to my chest and waited for him to be done, since other than that one outburst, he had mostly been polite, and my retail training wouldn't yet allow me to ask him to leave. He's staring at the application. "Yeah, we just need to fill it out and, we can get the ball rolling." I just can't wrap my head around the fact you need this information. This is crazy. It's what the shelter requires. And then, he begins writing the word fuck in all the spaces on the application. At that moment, my palms are sweating, Kin in my arms, with his head against my chest, trying to decide what to do. He suddenly looks up at me. "This is bullshit. The system is bullshit. All the cats will die without getting adopted with this system." I had a pretty good rush of adrenaline going at this point, but my inherently polite retail persona wouldn't yet ask him to leave. So instead, I told him that we typically find homes for about a dozen of homeless cats each week using the applications, actually. He stared at me and put his hands on the side of his head. He rocked back and forth for a moment, and then met my eyes and said, very, very clearly, "You have a mind like a Babylonian orgasm. I'm leaving." For a second, I felt like maybe I was the crazy one, like maybe that sentence made sense and I was simply unable to understand it. As I ran it through my head trying to figure out what he meant, he got up, slammed the door of the visitation room open, and stomped out the store. My kitten wasn't harmed, and as I put him back in his kennel, my manager approached me, her eyes wide. I showed the application on which the word fuck appeared numerous times and told her, I don't think we should adopt to him. So, crazy, tweaked out cat lover guy, let's never meet again. Creepy pet store guy. I'll preface this one by saying it isn't scary. It's one of those experiences where the weirdness and creepiness gradually revealed itself over time. Also, I'm sorry for the length. So to be fair, creepy pet store guy, CPG from here on, was not always CPG. She was just once APG. I used to hang out at the pet store across from the bookstore while my mom browsed. I like to look at books too. Sometimes I'd just sit and read. We'd be there for hours. So the pet store it was, to gaze at turtles, parrots, puppies, chinchillas, all of which I never owned because we had cats. There was a guy working there who I, 17 to 18, a senior to freshly graduated, amped with hormones, had developed a crush on. Seeing him often when he worked because I was there about once a week. He was a skinny blonde with glasses, and we had conversations where I found out he was sweet, funny, a gamer, animal lover. He did manage the birth section, and basically seemed to be my dream guy at the time. He was at most a couple years older than me. I think he was 20, and he seemed interested too. That summer right after I graduated, I finally cut it off with my previous on-again, off-again boyfriend, and I was looking to have some fun. So, when I needed cat food, I plucked up the courage to go to that pet store and see if I could ask out PG. I never asked a guy out before. Always have been the one to be pursued, so I was very nervous. But when I got there, to my delight, he asked me out. I was ecstatic. I tried to act cool, gave him my number, told him to hit me up. We went to a movie on our first date. He was quirky and awesome, and he showed up riding his unicycle for me in the street. Before walking me to my door, we seemed to be really clicking, and I was putting off as many kiss me and then come inside vibes as I could. But he stood a solid 2 feet from me and gave me a very slight hug when saying goodnight. I know I'm a physical person, and maybe even overly so I figured this was no big deal. But over the next couple weeks, we were seeing each other a whole lot, day and nights and dates, and night ones that could be very coupley and toothache sweet, but he was never into physical touching. Eventually, he started holding my hand sometimes, but it felt kind of like a token gesture. I figured maybe he's just not that way. This is fine, whatever. But it also nodded me because I was 18 and insecure. I tried to kiss him once, but he turned his face so it landed on his cheek, then backed away and acted like nothing had happened. I told him that if he wasn't into touching, it was totally cool, but I like to be told, so I knew to stop trying and figure out how to deal with it. All he said was, "A gentleman never takes advantage of a lady so early on." I thought it was just his way of chivalry, and thought I could handle it. He started to do some strange things, and show an angry side. Example, I like to feel like I'm standing on my own 2 feet a lot, so I tried to insist on paying for my own food, and he would insist on paying. We got more escalated about that. I would let him until one night. I was really insistent because, well, it really annoyed me, and he was being a jerk about it, so I demanded to know why he wouldn't let me pay for my own food. He said that I should just shut up and let him pay for my food, and be fucking grateful, woman, Jesus. He was also one of those gamers that really rages at the screen or into the mic, and he would play Call of Duty and scream obscenities, racist, homophobic shit. I wouldn't put up now, but I just chose to ignore at the time because I was weak, and even other death threats at other players. He would get so mad, he'd throw his controller at the wall and storm around the room, red-faced, yelling, and unable to contain himself, and I'd sneak to another room for a while. I learned quickly that gaming together wouldn't really work, and that should have been enough for me to end it. But it didn't. About 3 weeks into dating, I was out to dinner with my best friend and CBG called my cell. There was karaoke in the restaurant, so I went outside, and he started asking about where I was, why I hadn't told him where I was going, etc., controlling BS. He hinted with stuff like this before, but we've been spending so much time together that it hadn't been a huge issue. I had a really abusive relationship in high school where my schedule became very controlled, so I saw the need to nip that shit right in the bud. I told him I just went out and I didn't really feel the need to tell him, then asked him why he called. First, he said he was worried about me, and then he said he had to tell me something, which always gives me goosebumps, and for some reason, as it turns out, because he stammered, that he needed to admit that he was in love with me, and knew that I was the one. We were soulmates, meant to be together. I was freaking out, screaming internally, and he was just breathing into the phone, waiting for me to reciprocate. I guess. I said, "Oh, thanks. That's sweet. I gotta get back to dinner," and hung up. We were basically done eating, so I dragged my bestie to the car and screamed a few obscenities of my own, told her what happened, and she did too. Going molasses slowly physically, and then bullet train fast emotionally is definitely not my style. So the next day, we had to sit down and have a talk. I told him that I wasn't comfortable using the L word so early in a relationship, especially since the only thing we had done physically was hold hands. I told him it's slow for me to fall in love anyways, but when I can't even kiss someone, I have no way of knowing if we really have chemistry. I asked him if he planned on us kissing, making out, having sex anytime soon, and if not, then if there was a reason for that. I figured maybe trauma, so that I could understand and deal better. His response, and I remember him saying it pretty much in these words, was flippantly, "Oh, I already told you, a gentleman doesn't take advantage. We won't be doing that until we get married, of course, but don't worry, you won't have to wait long. That's only a few months away." Beaming, he just looked at me and I gasped, laughing nervously. Are you kidding? Nope, he really was convinced that we were going to get married soon. He acted like we were already engaged, talking about the wedding, like it was imminent. Went on so far as to say as the honeymoon, it'll happen. He even mentioned starting a family soon after that, with me being 18 years old and him being 20, and us having met less than a year before and dating less than a month. He was very enthusiastic and even seemed a little panicky, explaining this whole situation to me, saying it was how things had to be and that we were meant to be together, but I had to be a little patient. I was freaked out and thought that if I showed him how uncomfortable this made me, he might get angry or something like that, so I brushed it off, changed the subject, and we continued on that night with the rest of our date, though I was really not into it, and told him I really wanted to go to bed early. At this point, I pretty much just thought the guy was too into me emotionally, and we were on completely different pages about everything, so I needed to break it off. Call me a coward, but I did it over Steam the next morning, telling him I just didn't think we were compatible, because we seemed to want very different things. We could still be friends if he wanted, but I wanted to end the romantic part of our relationship. He flipped out, was very hurt, told me I was horrible for leading him on and letting him fall for me, and I pretty much expected all of that. What I didn't expect was for it to never be let go. He started texting and calling off the hook. I look at my phone and have tons of missed calls, voicemails of just him breathing or rambling about how we were supposed to be together, how I need to give him another chance, threatened self-harm a few times, sometimes crying so hard I couldn't even understand what he was saying. Also tons and tons of messages on Steam, Xfire, email, every medium we'd ever talked on. I felt really bad for him, but it also just freaked me out more and more and convinced me that I'd made the right decision. I tried to placate him, telling him I was sorry and comforting him and whatever, but after a few days, I realized I didn't have to do so. I told him I didn't want to talk to him anymore if he was gonna dwell on our history like that. Then he started to get angry. The flood of messages continued, but turned angry and mean, telling me I'd grown old and alone if I didn't take him back, that I needed him because I was nothing special, and that he was the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, how it'd be good for me to take him back because otherwise I just ignored him and kept it to myself. But he kept it up for weeks, and even more extreme stuff. I finally told my mother when he said he'd rather see me dead than with someone else, so I should think hard about that. After I showed her some of the latest messages and told her everything, my mom wrote down his email and told me to block him on everything, that she and my stepdad would handle the whole situation. They apparently emailed him and threatened him with police action, saying they had evidence and his personal information and weren't afraid to use it. I didn't get any more messages from him after that. Fast forward a little over a year, I'd avoided that particular pet store since for obvious reasons, but I found this 2-week-old kid wandering into the road and stopped my car to run out like a crazy person and stop the person behind me from hitting it, and I need a litter box to properly care for it. The nearest pet store and the only one on my way home was the one that CPG had worked at. I convinced myself that he probably doesn't even work there anymore. If he would be working, I'd avoid the bird section. Only a quick trip inside, right? After a beeline to litter boxes, after only like 2 minutes into the store, I hear, "Hey," from behind me. Sounds like him. Peek over my shoulder. Of course it's him. He was making intense eye contact with me and standing too close. I turned around, backed up. "Oh, hey. CPG, how you been?" "I've definitely been better." "Oh, sorry. I've been doing great." "Do you need help finding anything?" "No, got it. Just gotta go check out. Nice to see ya." Quickly began walking away, out of awkwardness more than fear or anything like that. I'm about 5 feet when I hear her in a soft voice. "I love you." That's when the booking it became out of fear. I actually shoved the litter box on a random side shelf and went the long way home to a different pet store. So, yeah, creepy pet store guy. Let's not meet ever again. One sentence burned into my brain forever. Okay, first time posting, and this happened 12 years ago, but after lurking on the sub for a few days, I was reminded of it, and I never ever forgot it. I was 20 years old and working at a large retail pet store in a very affluent neighborhood, and we were very busy during those years. Anyways, we closed at 9 p.m., and in this instance, myself, a 20-year-old female, and my male coworker Jerry, who was about 40 years old, was standing in the vestibule to physically close and lock the doors behind the few a-holes who decide to stick around to shop after closing time. To ensure that nobody was hiding in the bathrooms, we had an accurate count of customers still in the store, etc. Anyways, this guy dressed in a huge-ass red turban, long beard, and a full floor-length white robes is standing there, with us waiting for his similarly attired wife and kid to finish checking out at the register, and yes, they appear to be of foreign descent, judging by their skin color and manner of dress. While the three of us are waiting by the main doors, a guy drives up outside and rushes to the door, and I tell him, "Sorry sir, we're closed." He gets all angry for a couple seconds, and I tell him again, "Sorry, we're closed." He is pissed and stomps back to his car. Then rogue guy says to me very, very calmly and without an accent, "You are very lucky. If that had been me, I would have stabbed you." I am speechless, and my coworker is as well. About 10 to 20 seconds later, the guy's unfortunate wife and kid gets to the door, and we let them out. My coworker Jerry is feeling stunned at this point and bad. He's clearly as shaken up as I am and keeps telling me, "You know I wouldn't have let him hurt you, right?" I believe him. Jerry's a pretty big guy with a good heart. This piece of crap comes back a couple times afterwards, and I told my manager that I refused to wait on him and hid in the office every time he came through. Looking back now, I would demand that they refuse him entry into the store, but hey, I was 20, so wish you could stab me, guy. Let's not meet. I feel sorry for your wife and kid.